Hello and welcome to my Honey Select 2 character creation tutorial. A few things before I get started. Just want to apologise. I am by no means a professional content creator. This is my first attempt at even recording a video. So I don't have any video editing software. This is going to be one enormous take, probably full of me coughing and spluttering and breathing into my quite crappy microphone like some kind of sex offender. I do apologise for the quality, but hopefully you're going to get something from this video aside from my weird sounding voice. Want to say thank you first and foremost to Illusionsoft for this fantastic sandbox that we get to play with, and even huger set of thanks to our modding community. You people are absolute legends. Thank you for the mods you've already put into this game or developed specifically for Honey Select, and the gargantuan task of porting most of the mods, if not all of the mods, from AI Shoujo. That is a huge undertaking. Take doff my hat to you, bow down. You guys are absolutely fantastic. Thank you for making an already great set of tools even better. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So why am I making the video? Well, first and foremost, I get a lot of feedback from the guys in the community, F95 Zone, the Illusion Soft Discord, Reddit as well. Lots of positive feedback. I'm flattered and humbled by what some of you have seen from my posts and my creations. Even more humbled that many of you probably already have some of my cards in your collection. I do spend a huge amount of time trying to make realistic looking and attractive. I want them to be hot, obviously. We want hot women, but making attractive looking creations. So for those of you that know my stuff, I wanted to make a video just to kind of show you what my process is, how we go from the default character to something that looks completely different. The other thing I wanted to sort of address with this video was the huge complaint that many of you out there have, and I don't know if this is just sort of a hangover from previous solution titles, but the ability to make Western looking features. Now, there's a few of you out there that either think it's outright impossible without modifying the game heavily, and I am running a modded version, so that's a little disclaimer there, but as we're going through and adjusting those facial features, you're going to notice I'm not actually using any modifications to create those Western looking features. It's a little bit fiddly, and you do have to kind of poke and prod and tweak, but it's perfectly possible to make Western looking women. I'm sure many of you already know that, but for those of you out there who are a bit confused about how you might go about it, this video should be for you. So if you're a seasoned pro with the creation tool, or even if you're only playing AI Shoujo, you're not playing Honey Select, you should hopefully find something in this video for you, as the tools are basically identical. And if you're a complete newbie, I hope this sort of gets you on the road for making some really beautiful looking creations. Last little thing, yes, I know I need to activate Windows. It's a fresh install. So that's what we say to the god of Windows, not today. Not today. So let's get started. So we're going to start with, well, start from the top. What do I do when I start making a character? The most important thing, just to get yourself going, is just to set up the space that you're creating your girl in. Sounds a bit weird, but it's probably me overcomplicating it. But there are a few things that are going to help you make a much more realistic looking character, and they're going to help you kind of not lose your way as you're trying to get these facial features right, because that's really what we're going to be focusing. This entire video is just going to be about the face. Obviously I will need to keep it safe for work, so there won't be any nudity. I can't show you any of my previous creations because I don't put any clothes on my models, so yeah. So first thing we're going to do is pause the play pose. That's just my personal preference. I prefer the model to be static, so she's not kind of moving around. I'm not chasing the face around when you start to zoom in, because we are going to be sort of zooming in and sort of viewing the face from pretty much every single angle. The next thing is quite important. You're going to set the character's gaze to the front-facing position. We are going to spend quite a bit of time on the eyes. As you can imagine, trying to make a Western looking face, we are going to be focused on the eyes. That's where a lot of people sort of find it to be a stumbling block. So it's very difficult to make a Western looking face if her eyes are following you around. The position of the irises is very important. to that and where it sort of meets the eyelid. So that, before I get too technically into that, there's going to be a whole section on that. Make sure she's set to a forward-facing position, just so as you're moving the face around, her expression stays in the same spot. And the most important, I would say, just to get your play space set up, is lighting. Now, this is something I've played a lot of illusion games in the past, but this is something I've discovered through getting very in depth with Honey Select 2 and Studio Neo. Thank you, COVID-19. But lighting is apparently my kink. I didn't know this, but yeah. So anyone who's seen any of my posts will know that I spend a lot of time kind of lighting my scenes and lighting my characters correctly. But one thing that I've noticed in a lot of people's character creations is a lot of the facial features, or at least the kind of structure of the face, looks almost identical, even if they're a very heavily stylized looking character. And I think that may be down to some features perhaps being overlooked by some of the users out there. So we're going to be going into face type in a bit of detail a bit later on in the video. But what we want to do is add a bit of definition and detail to the face. And the way that we're going to do that is make sure that we've got at least a little bit of shadow. Might be a bit too much, but what we're looking for is some shading here on the side of the nose, so we can see how that shadow sort of affects it. We also want some lighting here on the cheek, so we can see as we start to mess with the cheekbones. If you are using mods, at the moment I'm playing with the DHH mod, so what I'm going to do is going to turn that on. This is not going to make anything too drastic if you're just playing on vanilla, but this will allow me just to add a tiny bit more shading to the nose, and also slightly kind of stronger light on this side. So you want kind of a stark light here and a very natural light on that side of the face. And we're just going to bump that up a little bit. Now this is optional, but personally I find it, I mean, even if you're in a vanilla game, especially if you're just playing vanilla, just adding that little bit of shading there is going to help you make a much more realistic looking face. It's going to let you see how some of the changes that you make to the face are going to have a sort of a knock-on effect to other parts of the face. It's one thing that we'll kind of go into is, you know, moving one slider on one feature will affect maybe two more. So it can be a little bit complicated, it can be a little bit daunting to start off with. And the last little thing, very simple. We're just going to take the bangs off. No bangs. Firstly, just to show you that Illusion have no idea how foreheads work. That is not what a forehead looks like, Illusion. But we are trying to make a more realistic face. And the default girl here is quite youthful looking. She's, you know, the facial features are very squashed at the bottom here, which you will find in younger faces with a much larger forehead. I'm pretty sure your eyeballs are the only part of your face that doesn't grow ever. I think you're born with the same size eyeballs that you die with. Not sure about that, if someone can confirm. So you're going to find much larger eyes on sort of younger looking models. But the first thing we're going to be moving on the face is getting the eyebrows and the eyes into a much higher position. This is way too much forehead. And it's very difficult to try and make a sort of a well-balanced face if you've got a sort of massive anime fringe in the way and you're only sort of using this very, very small space here. Take the bangs off, you've got much more area to play with, but you are going to run into one of the first problems with the character model, and that is the sort of limitation on where the eyes can go, and also how the protrusion affects this horrible part of the face. Now, I like noses in real life, but the nose in this creation tool is probably the worst feature. So I will probably throw my computer out the window when we get to the nose. Who knows? So we are going to move the eyebrows first. So just adjust the y-axis there, get them up. So they kind of sit. That might be a little bit too high, but we are going to be sort of tweaking, coming back in, coming back out. Those of you out there, yes, I do have the wide slider mod installed. That is not going to affect really anything. I may not even actually end up using it. I don't know. Once we've kind of gotten a broad stroke on the face, so we've got the features in the right spot, we may go into one or two sliders, but really I only kind of use wide slider to sort the nose out, because the nose is an absolute disaster. So eye position as well. And one reason you don't want to put the eyes too high. Oh, and go away depth of field. Yep. There we go. Much better. So changing the y-axis here, you're going to see where that limitation is. And if you are using wide slider and you're kind of going quite sort of full ham with the sliders, you're going to see clipping. You're going to see clipping like that. And for a more natural looking face, obviously, we don't want any sort of collision like that. So we'll probably position the eyes here for the time being. Everything is constantly work in progress, but so with that sort of eye position there, we're sort of changing the balance of the overall face. Now, before we get too in depth into the eyes, one thing we're going to do, we are making a Western-looking face, is to use a feature that automatically makes more of a Western-looking face without you having to do anything to the eyes, which is depth. Push the depth in. That's probably too much. We'll get into the nose there. But a tiny bit more depth without even adjusting the default eye setting is already a much more of a Western looking face than you'd find with the default. The Asiatic features are very flat. That's just obviously just a trick of bone structure, but you'll generally find deeper set features in the Western face. What we're also trying to do, and this is one problem that you're going to need to kind of tweak the eyes and wiggle things about a little bit, and trying to balance it as a more realistic looking face, is the bridge. Now the bridge of the nose is generally going to be kind of lined up with the center of the pupil. So that is another little trick to try and get your face into the right position. I think I just moved her eyes about there. So we'll probably put that about there, just for now. And we may just shrink the eyes down just a tiny bit. Just for the time being. Now, see, that's not looking. It's going to be a series of tiny little nudges that will eventually kind of make it look. But if we're looking at that section of the face there, we're already sort of looking at a sort of a much improved looking sort of expression. That is much more of a Western looking feature without touching this part of the eye just yet. It may just change the eyebrows. I don't like those eyebrows, and I think my anti-aliasing is going a bit weird. So let's find an eyebrow that we like. I don't like any of the eyebrows. They all look a bit weird. Who are you? I'm sort of getting into my modded ones. Oh, angry looking eyebrows. Okay, so we'll just sort of tweak those a little bit. Shrink them down. That's what I'm looking for. Ooh, she's looking a bit angry. So, and then a bit more width. Yep. So generally you'll find with an eyebrow in a real face is that it will kind of meet the top of where the bridge starts to kind of fan out into the brow here. So that is quite an important thing when you're looking at kind of alignment of a face. I mean, some people will pluck their eyebrows and whatnot, but trying to find that sort of sweet spot for the sort of heavier features on the face, and I think particularly getting the eyebrows and the eyes is absolutely crucial for any of your creations, to be honest. Quick slurp of drink there. So this will just be a sort of a placeholder for now. She does look a little bit sad. Don't want her to look sad the whole time, so we'll just do that. And now you want to sort of look at her cheeks. I would say probably be the best start, because at the moment they're still this sort of chubby, sort of youthful looking face. So go into the cheek setting, and first thing we're going to do is get rid of the lower cheeks. We're going to shrink those down a little bit, but you don't want to go too deep, and I'll show you why. Whoops, that's upper cheek, wrong one. Okay, so we'll see my graphic settings here are kind of filling in the gaps, but if you pull the cheeks in too much, or if you protrude any of the features too much, you're going to get this clipping issue. So always just make sure that you're sort of keeping those features soft, you're keeping the lines nice and round. So we're going to probably, so you can see just in this area there where it's already starting to clip. I mean, this is modded, so it is kind of going into the extremes, but I think what we'll do is just kind of leave it there for the time being. And then the lower cheek axis, we're going to push that up a little bit there. So again, that's clipping again. Might need to give it a little bit of a tweak. But you can see why it's handy to have that shading there, because you can then start to see how it's actually affecting the structure of your face. So I'm thinking we can give her some quite sort of pronounced cheekbones here. So thinking that's probably a good spot just for the time being. Next will be the upper cheek. Now the upper cheek, and obviously stretching the eyes out and stretching this whole area here. As I mentioned, one slider will definitely have another effect on 2 or 3 more sliders. So knowing kind of which ones are dragging which parts of the face around is quite handy, and you will pick that up with experience. But if we go, say we have a look at the y-axis here, you can see how drastic that is. Now, obviously, the eyes are going to be the most striking feature on this face, or they're going to be something we're going to put a lot of time into. So we don't want too many things going wrong with the eyeballs. So, and certainly not the lower eyelid, because that's going to be kind of crucial to getting that Western-looking face. So, there we go. Let's have a look. So, a little bit of protrusion there. May bring those up. And we'll just sort of, that's a little bit skeletal. That's why it's always good just to constantly move the model around and just make sure that you're happy with everything. And again, that's why the shading, why the lighting is so useful. Okay, so we've gotten that sort of balance there for the cheekbones. It's changed the structure of the face, and with a few, I mean, we've just done this, and we've moved the eyebrows. And already we're kind of on the road to making a very different looking character from the default model, and something that's starting to look a little bit more Western, but early days. So still getting a little bit of clipping there. So probably up that protrusion. That's going to be the mouth, I think. That's, yeah. Okay, we'll come back to you in a moment then. Now, we're trying to keep the face balanced. If we're sort of looking at this kind of size for the eyes, this much space between the forehead, we're going to probably need a little bit more face to work with. So I'd recommend going into the jaw, dropping the axis a little bit. And we don't want it to have too much of a manly chin. So to start off with, we're just going to kind of push these features out. And we're trying to sort of look and just have a look between each of the features. We haven't changed the nose at the moment, but we're trying to find a nice balance between where the chin position is, this line with the cheeks here, which should then sort of fit in with the nostrils. So we'll probably keep this nose around about the same position, just so I don't go completely insane trying to get the nose to work properly. But you're looking for a very natural looking face. So push the chin down a little bit. And then we're probably going to move the mouth. So get that in. Now I think what we might do is just sort of maybe just a slight protrusion. So with the jaw, I mean chin protrusion, the most extreme. It's very sort of very cartoony there. We'll put that in there. I think just a tiny bit of protrusion, just so you get that kind of line there, which is nice. I like that. Maybe increase the chin size. I'm not sure. Let's have a little look. Increasing the chin size can go very wrong very quickly, as with all the sliders. But having a tiny bit of prominence will give you a much more kind of natural looking face. Okay, I think that looks quite nice. All right, so I think we've got our mouth position. I think our mouth position works with that sort of ratio between her chin there. Yeah, I think I'm avoiding the nose, so I think we should go on the nose. All right, so let's have a look. I mean, having a look at it, I was kind of happy with its position already. It's just by stretching the rest of these features down, we haven't had to mess with that too much. It depends on how wrong this nose goes. I may need to mess around with wide slider a little bit, but we shall see. So I don't really want to move that too much. It's got a tiny bit of a lump there, I'm not sure why. Now, as I mentioned about coming back to the upper and lower face protrusion, this would be sort of a good point, certainly when you're sort of looking at changing this profile of the face. just to have a quick look and see how the upper and lower face protrusion actually affects the character. Okay, so we've got that there kind of brings her face into slightly flatter looking, but I think perhaps a bit of protrusion there. And I'm probably going to say protrusion an awful lot. I've just realised I've probably said it about 20 times already. There, we'll come back into the nose just to see if that does. I mean, some of these, it's more trial and error rather than expertise, because sometimes you'll move a slider, it will knock everything else out, and you'll just start crying. So, bridge width, thinking probably about there. We want it to sort of taper out slightly. Okay. Nose protrusion, I don't think we want that out much further than it is, but we are going to change the nostril position, and then we'll sort of see how we feel about the rest of the nose, because this will be the part of the face I'll spend about 10 hours on, so I'd rather not bore you with that particular detail, and we want to sort of get into the features that really start to bring this character to life. So changing that axis there, we don't want it to be too sort of piggy and snorting, so that looks okay. Nostril protrusion, that will obviously start to push into the line that you've got for the cheeks, so but that will get you a much more natural looking nostril. It's looking okay without me breaking things too much. Maybe take the tip size down a bit. I'm not really too sure what type of nose I'm going for at this point. I'm just sort of playing, and hopefully it will come together. Okay, so I think for the time being, we're just going to keep that there. May very quickly just have a look at the bridge shape again. Oh no, now you can see there, you see, because we've adjusted the protrusion, I think, the upper face protrusion. I think that'll just be where it's impacting with the fact that we've changed that eye position. So it is always worthwhile bearing in mind that sometimes if you are trying to push the game where it doesn't quite want to go, and it doesn't really want to be here, it wants you to make tiny little faces in this triangle because it wants you to make anime schoolgirls. That's always something to bear in mind, and it's also where wide slider does actually come in very, very handy. Let's have a quick look at the face type here. I believe it was the upper front head scale Y, so if you do have this mod, that might actually help you kind of wiggle your way out of it, or at least kind of push that position up a little bit more. Now we've still got that jaggy bit there. What's going on there? Yeah. Okay, so we've already got a mistake to deal with. Let's figure out what's happening with the mod. Or just at least a model. What is wrong with your face? And now you can see exactly why I hate the nose. Okay, so we may need to bite the bullet on the eye position, I'm not sure. Nope. All right. Technical difficulties, guys. Technical difficulties. All right. So this is part of the process to try to figure out what I've done wrong. Okay. Well, I think we'll bring this back down. I was in a happier. Actually, was in a happier place at 100. Damn it, Tubes! What did you do? What did you do? Okay. That's that protrusion. All right, we'll have to deal with that. That's just me being pedantic. Bridge. Perhaps it was bridge shape. Yeah. I think it was bridge shape. Why? I hate the nose. I hate the nose. I hate the nose. I hate the nose. Okay. Bridge height. I kind of want that deeper, but I want the Okay, I think we'll just press on before I spend too much time looking at this going, what the fuck has gone wrong? So again, trying to keep that balance with the bridge position. I think we're going to just lower the eyes for the time being, and I'll come back to that and scratch my head or watch the video and realize it was something really simple the whole time. So are we happy with the nostrils? Very quickly, last little bit. We may make those a tiny bit wider because we're looking to try and sort of match them with this sort of line here. Just for personal preference, but you will find that in a lot of faces. Last little bit will be the lips, just for getting those sort of broad strokes of the character down. So without modifying it too much or playing too much with wide sliders, you can obviously go fairly ridiculous using those tools. But I think a tiny bit of protrusion, that will help us kind of figure out if there's any more clipping. Yeah, we can just see a tiny little bit there. That shouldn't be too bad. So it looks a little bit like she's got stubble with that. Make slightly larger lips. Get the bottom lip out slightly. And then upper lip misbehaves in quite a weird way, but I think just pressing that down ever so slightly there. And okay, so without kind of going into the mad sort of detail of the eyes, which we'll be moving on to next, we're sort of on the road. We've got the basic structure down. So going into the eyes. Now, obviously the people that kind of level the complaints, oh dear, just changed that, shouldn't have done that. Level the complaints that you can't make Western characters without modifying the game massively. First and foremost, the main modified tool that people use is wide slider, and wide slider has absolutely no options for the eyes. So you know, that's sort of first thing to say, well, I'm not really affecting the shape of this with any kind of drastic modification. This just literally changes the scale. We may use this a little bit later just to kind of tweak the eyes, but even if we wanted to, there are no other modifications. We are using just the default sliders here. So let's get into it. So start with the eyelid shape 2. And one reason why I was talking about centering her gaze is obviously to make sure that she's facing forward, but obviously we want to try and kind of get this iris into the center of the eyelid if we can. So oh dear, wrong one. So, so slide these out a little bit, perhaps deepen that so we just have a little bit more, and then we'll do the same on the outside as well without it kind of breaking the game too much. Generally you'll start to see kind of weird glitching if you're going sort of outside of the bounds of the eye, so that's a quite helpful tool. I'm thinking maybe she could probably do with have slightly wider eyes. Oops. Bring these down a little bit. Obviously, look, the expression's a little bit crazy at the moment, but we are just kind of getting started. Eyelid shape 1 is a huge favourite of mine. Obviously, that will kind of give you that kind of kawaii, you know, kind of look, or you know, quite miserable looking. But what we're trying to do is just kind of level this off a tiny bit. We don't want to go too far. One thing we're going to be doing, and one reason why I said the gaze was quite important, is going into iris settings and just adjusting the height so she's looking in that direction. Obviously this is a little bit stretched at the moment, so don't worry too much about that. We may just for argument's sake just change, so we've got width 70, 2062. What we're looking for is just to try to have a little bit of space here. You want a tiny bit of white underneath there, and you wouldn't be able to get that expression certainly if the character is following you around. It suddenly becomes quite difficult to get that eye into the right spot. So at least facing forward, it helps you kind of position the lids, position the cheeks, and get everything in the right place. So carry on tweaking. So each one of these sliders, sometimes I kind of look at it and go, which one is that? Don't worry. Even people that spend literally hours in this on a daily basis forget what each of the sliders do. But once you start kind of tweaking them, that's kind of half the fun, is just kind of pushing things around, seeing what works. So I don't think we want her tear ducts to be too low, because then that will start to stretch into something that looks a little bit more Asian. But that is a feature you will see in Western faces, so a sort of argument like, well, does it look Western enough? We shall see. But we'll push that back up. I think keep that in the position it was in. Slightly lower, so it's kind of a little bit more balanced across there. We do need the outer edge. A little bit more space. And that, for the time being, as I said, everything is just you tweak one part, move on to the next, tweak one part, move on to the next. Don't expect to get any of the features right on the first pass. I think it's impossible. So just get yourself into a sort of broad strokes position, so something that looks okay for the time being, and then move on to the next feature, and just to sort of keep working like that. Okay, so we have our eye position. Now, obviously, it's not looking extremely Western at this point, but we haven't gone into any of the eye detail. We haven't gone into changing changing the iris as well. That's very important to kind of adding realism to your character. So what do I want to do? Let's do irises. Let's do iris settings here. So if you're running vanilla, there's thousands, or not really thousands, but there's too many. A lot of these eyes I'll probably never use, but we are going to be trying to find something that's got a more of a realistic tone to it. Also, if possible, something that's kind of got a reflection built in, or at least a part of the eye that is already sort of highlighted. That's going to give your character's eyes a lot more depth, and then I can teach you a few other tricks about increasing that depth even further. So try and find something that looks sort of reasonable from the get-go. We can start playing with it. Haven't decided on eye color. Eye color. That's going to kind of come with hair color, so don't know. Let's see. Oh, these are a little bit low res, not sure why. Oh, they're very, very pixelated. That's not looking too bad, but for some reason it's flat on the bottom. I think because they're expecting you to have the iris absolutely huge. So no. I think that looks pretty nice. So it doesn't really come with any shine, but it's got this sort of detail here. Perhaps a little bit bright. So we're going to go in, just change the color slightly. I prefer to use these sliders here just because it's a bit more intuitive to just have your sort of brightness and saturation like that. So personal preference. Some people are really good with RGB and no codes and things like that. Not me. Okay, so we're kind of going to darken our eyes somewhat. I think we'll make brown eyes, or at least something resembling brown. Always worth just having a look and seeing how glow affects each eye. Obviously, with modded ones, some of those effects will be quite drastic. Others, it will barely be noticeable. So it's always worth just having a little bit of a tweak with each slider as you go into a new menu, just to see. You never know, you may discover a little trick, or you discover something that looks great. Okay, and if we're happy with the pupils, see, generally, I do quite like to use, certainly for lighter coloured eyes, using the Type 7 pupil, just because it has a sort of diffuse effect around the outside of it. It can work on darker eyes, although sometimes you can kind of lose a little bit of the detail. But one nice little trick, because we've got this light at the bottom here, we're going to mess with the highlight, the reflection. So we don't need to worry too much about what that's looking like at the moment. We're going to increase the height. I don't think even stretches past there, so that's fine. But if you widen it up a little bit, I think maybe perhaps there. Let's have a little look. And always just kind of zoom out, have a little look. Okay, back to the iris. I think we'll add just a tiny bit more brightness. Yeah, I think that's looking okay for the time being. Cool. Right, so the eye highlight. Now this is also a really huge feature. Try to find the right sort of reflection. Well, that one kind of works already. Is also crucial. That's going to change your character's eyes from something stylized and kind of impossible looking to something that's quite sort of natural and kind of teary-eyed. Like that. And these, I think, are kind of almost photorealistic ones. They look pretty good. Quite like those. I think I quite like that one, actually. And then you can kind of tweak it, see if you're happy with the light position being somewhere else. Just kind of rotate that. I prefer to sort of have your sort of reflection kind of going almost across the horizontal plane, or you're sort of lighting the light from the iris from below. So that's already starting to look a lot more natural. Quickly back into eye highlight, iris settings. That was it. May adjust that field of shadow somewhat. Very nice. And then maybe up the brightness a little bit on the eyes. Stick it out there. Excellent. Okay, so we've got our broad strokes. We've got the face in the right spot. Now we're going to almost entirely change this face, and this is probably the feature I think a lot of people maybe overlook, or maybe don't know how insane it is. Quick slurp of my drink. Yes, it is face type. Face type is king. I absolutely adore this feature. Now the game will start you on type 3 by default. So if you're going into skin and wrinkles, these two features I absolutely adore. I will always play with them. But if you are looking for a lot more options for your skin, in particular a lot of the modded skins will go into type 2, as will some of the wrinkles. Now one thing, I'm not 100% certain how this actually works or how it interacts, but switching from type 2 will deepen a lot of the features. It will very quickly just overlay another skin type that's in there. And the second you start to deepen the features, you're going to realize why I put so much importance on light. At least that's in theory. So fingers crossed, because this is not edited. So let's go. Type 2 and okay. So it has changed the face quite a bit. First thing you'll notice is it stretched the eyes out, so she looks a little bit more psychotic than she did before. Again, you're always coming back and tweaking. The nose has been sharpened up somewhat because it's just tightened up the features. And now we've got a little bit more contouring and texture on there. Type 2 by default does this. This is not necessarily a mod, but it will overlay the character with a slightly adjusted bone structure. So I do prefer just to work in type 3. This is just an odd thing. It's not quite like kind of tossing a coin, but once you're in the right sort of direction that you want to take the character, switch over to type 2, and then you're presented with a sort of a very different looking face, even though it's the same face you've been working on. And it's crucially why I put so much emphasis on lighting, just purely because you're already now looking at a lot more detail around the eyes. And then when we start to add wrinkles and those sorts of features, first things first though, we need to sort her eyes out. She looks a little bit scary, so we are gonna drop that height down a little bit, because again we are still looking for And I know she looks even scarier, but what we might do, this will probably just stretch, but it's much quicker than fiddling with everything independently. We'll just adjust the Y scale here. And that's squished everything back up again. So again, it's sort of tweak, adjust, tweak, adjust. So we'll come back to the iris. Iris settings. Actually, we'll get that there. First of all, we need a little bit more height, so probably bump that up to about 53, maybe. I think these need to be a little bit bigger. And we'll have you about 69. Okay, so that's a little bit better. Back to your iris settings and just readjust the height again. Oddly enough, that reflection stays in the same place. I did not know that. I thought it moved with the eye. Good to know. I've learned something on this video. Hooray. Okay, so eye highlight, that's what I'm looking for. So we'll probably just adjust that and just push it back up. Push it back up the face. Stretch that a little bit, seeing as the eyes are now slightly bigger than they were before. And then squeeze that width out a little bit. So there we go. Right, back to face type. So we're in type 2. The next two features are going to have a sort of drastic effect on the way that this face will eventually look. So we're going to go into skin. This is entirely personal preference. Just wait for that to load. Let's slurp some drink quick when I do that. Okay, if you're using a modded version of the game, I'm not a huge fan of these. It's a fantastic bit of work by the modder, but I tend to find that these facial sort of makeup overlays sort of washes the face out a little bit. So I'm not a massive fan. These ones don't work. I don't know what the point of them is. They're all, well, that one's just hideous. But yeah, these are all just, you know, kind of like mime makeup or something like that. I'm a huge fan of these K-type ones here. Now, coming back to making a modified face, la-di-da. One thing I like about this particular skin overlay is the fact that it will give you that definition under the eyes there. But that is actually a feature you can add with some of the eyeshadows. So you can kind of use a combination of the skin, your wrinkles, and the makeup to sort of get sort of 3 or 4 sort of features on the face really sort of prominent and give them a lot more depth and detail. One little problem with the K-type ones is every single one of them has a mole under the left eye. So if you start using that too much, you're going to end up with a whole bunch of girls that look identical because they've all got the same mole. But I mean, this is more down to personal preference. So we're just trying to sort of, we're still kind of sounding out this face here. So let's have a little flick through each of them. And again, why I chose the light is you can actually see the effect in a much more detail. And I think possibly for those of you out there sort of making characters just in the default sort of flat lighting, this is what you're missing. You're missing some sort of really drastic changes to the face. So, you know what, I think we may end up landing on a K-type, possibly just for the time being. I'm in the mood for. I think that looks quite nice. Okay, so we've got the skin down. Now to play with some wrinkles. So don't be afraid, even if you're making a sort of a youthful looking character, don't be afraid to add some creases, some lines. Faces have lines. Obviously it is this is a fantasy making tool. We are going for realism, but don't be afraid to add a few creases here and there. I'd say before you get started, just bump this up a little bit, just so as you're cycling through each of these features, you can really have a look and see at its most extreme what it's doing to your character's face. So these two, these 3 down here, I'm not sure what they're about. This is the most extreme, but I think what that's doing is just adding, it's just adding adding pores and things like that. It's quite cool, but at its most extreme, that's horrifying. Um, so okay, so we'll come into this. We'll drop that down somewhat. So we've gone into shape assistance there, and what that's done is it drastically highlighted those cheekbones. So if you're that's what you're kind of looking for in that face, it may be worthwhile you then going back into the cheeks, having a little look, and see what you can adjust to make that look a little bit more natural. Because cheekbones don't generally sit that close, um, so we may just drop that down a little bit. So we'll just sit with that one, I think. Maybe drop the protrusion slightly. She's still got very defined cheekbones, and now that we've added that wrinkle effect to it, we don't need to have such drastic features because we've added that bit of highlight, we've added that bit of depth. And in just a sec, we're going to move on to adding lipstick and cheek and the sort of the cheek makeup and eyeshadow to accentuate that even further. So I think actually just with that little tweak there, we've gotten the sort of shape assistance skin there, which is looking quite nice. I think if we see, it adds a lot more definition to the nose as well. So if you're looking to try and make stronger features, it's always worthwhile making sure you get your lighting right and just ramping everything up as hard as it will go just to see. It's always worth checking. Another personal favourite of mine, we will come back to shape assistance, is just a smile line. Nice and simple. I mean, you can go kind of drastically into making an aged face, but you add a smile line, drop that right down, and it's already a face that kind of starts to look a little bit more kind of lived in than just a sort of blank or sort of completely plasticky looking face. So we'll come down back to shape assistance, bump it back up again because we just dropped the strength, didn't we? About there. Good stuff. Right, so makeup. Makeup is... Oh no, we've got eyelashes. That's another thing. Skipped. I'm not referring to my list now, I'm just off on one, so I do apologise. Not sure how long I've been talking. Fingers crossed you don't hate me completely, but alright, so eyelashes are personal preference, to be quite honest with you. You can mod these to your heart's content. It depends on the sort of face. I think what we're probably going to go do before we sort of call her finished, we'll probably give her slightly larger lips, I think, just kind of sort of keep up with the eyes there. I'm thinking I like those. Let's settle with those. Okay. So for eyeshadow, as I was mentioning, we are using that K-type skin there, which is already giving us that definition. But if you want to choose a slightly different skin overlay, or you don't have that installed, that's perfectly fine. You can get that exact same feature for many of these makeup effects here. You'll be able to see just in the icon underneath there, it's just got that sort of slightly highlighted area underneath. So start off with same as adding the skin types. Just go for the most extreme to start off with, just so you can see what it's doing to the face, and then tone it down from there. So we don't really need to add much more definition to this part here. So I think what we'll do is just avoid that entirely. But that is a good tip. If you wanted to sort of add a slight bulge to the eyes, which is what you'll find on a face, you can use a combination of makeup, and then you could use the skin type to make the lips more prominent or make the nose more prominent. It's entirely up to you. But I think what we might do is just go for a very simple, let's just go for a simple eyeliner, just to sort of accentuate the look of her face somewhat. Drop the opacity. Now the opacity slider for makeup is king. I love it. So good. So that's looking quite good. And then we may just bump it up a little bit. I mean, by default, it will sit you in the red. So if you're moving it up to about here, then you can pretty quickly go for a brown looking shade. You'll be able to see if you kind of ramp it up a little bit more, get it more into the colour, and sort of around here you're looking at your browns. But I think a little bit more depth there. And there we go. So we've got a lot more detail happening around the face, a lot more detail happening around a very Western looking expression already. Yep, looking good. Good stuff. And then cheeks. Now cheeks, you don't need to just come straight in with these kind of sort of dolly looking bright red cheeks. But what we're going to be using the cheek makeup for, because I think we're going to try and sort of keep this face with a minimal amount of makeup. I think this will be the most sort of visible example of her wearing makeup that you're going to see in the video. But we are going to use the cheeks for quite a clever little trick for adding even more highlight to the face. So this one here, yeah, looks like it's you can see there it's just adding detail, and we've made this point of highlighting her cheeks, so we're going to do that even further by taking the colour out a little bit so it's not so obvious that she's wearing that makeup. The alpha's already down there. Good work, opacity. I think that's maybe remembered a setting from me doing that before. And then, without going too extreme, you can see there, just with a little bit of shine, that helps define her feature a lot more. May just drop the colour out of it a little bit more. Very sharp looking cheekbones. I'm not sure if I'm entirely happy with them yet, but yeah, there we go. Last little bit for the face is lips. So I'm not a huge fan. If you've read any of my posts on the F95, the lipsticks can sometimes look great, other times they can kind of look a little bit terrible. It depends really what you're kind of going for. As I mentioned, we're going to try and keep her sort of makeup to a minimum, I think, just for the purposes of the video. We don't want to go too extreme. So choose like type 4, something like that. And same again, mess around with your browns and reds. You can't really go wrong if you're doing makeup with browns and reds. Drop that down a little bit so it actually looks more like her sort of natural lip colour. Drop the opacity. And prefer to add a little bit more shine to the lip, just so it catches the light there like that. Fantastic. Okay, last little touches. What do we want to do? I mean, I could spend hours, so I am going to wrap the video up very, very shortly. But as I said, what we'll probably do is just broaden her mouth. Broaden her mouth slightly. And then, what do we want to do with her hair? Don't know. Oh, that's bangs. No, that's still bangs. It's me scrolling coming down going, all of this looks weird. There we go. Let's have a none. Absolutely perfect. Well, perfect-ish. That's a matter of opinion. So there we go. We've gone through from top to bottom. We've turned the default Asian face into a Western-looking face, and you know, obviously with a few extra little tweaks here and there with the skin, but she's come together quite quickly and quite nicely. If you do have any questions for me, I'm fairly vocal on F95 zone, so any thread that's to do with Honey Select 2, jump in there, Mr. Wrong Tubes, chuck me any questions or complaints or anything like that about the video. This is my first time uploading anything to YouTube, so have I got to say leave a like and subscribe? I don't know. But hopefully I'll see you guys out there. I really hope you found this useful. I will continue to sort of release plenty of cards into the wild. I do like creating women that look, you know, sort of in this kind of ballpark. But yeah, fingers crossed you've had a good time, and I do apologise for my voice. I'm going to drink about 5 gallons of coffee now. Thank you for watching. Bye.